The creative revolution of surrealism, inner worlds, ancient symbols, and the refusal of limits. There are moments in history when reality stops making sense. After the First World War, Europe entered one of those moments, not just politically, but psychologically. The systems that had promised order and progress had led directly into catastrophe. For a generation of artists in Paris, André Breton, Max Ernst, Salvador Dalí, this was not simply a crisis of society. It was a crisis of reality itself. What could be trusted if reason had failed? What could be created if meaning itself had collapsed? Surrealism emerged from that question, not as decoration, but as a response to disorientation. Section 1. Before Surrealism, Dada and the Refusal. Before Surrealism, there was something even more radical: refusal. Dada was not trying to rebuild meaning. It was trying to destroy it completely. In Zurich, Berlin, Paris, artists like Tristan Tzara and others responded to the war not with new ideas, but with anti-ideas. Nonsense poems, random performances, collages made of scraps. It was a protest against logic itself. If reason led to war, then reason had to be dismantled. Max Ernst came out of this environment. His works carry often that same violence, the sense that images are no longer stable, that meaning can be cut apart and rearranged without obligation. But André Breton began to feel that pure destruction was not enough. Dada could tear reality down, but it could not replace it. Surrealism begins exactly at that point, not destruction, but reconstruction, using the fragments Dada left behind. Section 2. André Breton, the architect of the invisible. At the center stands André Breton. He was not the most visually radical, not the most technically gifted, but he was something else, an organizer of forces. Trained in psychiatry, Breton had worked with soldiers whose minds had fractured under the pressure of war. He listened to speech that no longer obeyed logic, sentences that slipped, broke, reassembled. Where others saw pathology, Breton saw possibility. He began to imagine a form of expression that could bypass conscious control entirely. Automatic writing, language without censorship, thought before reason. But Breton's project was not purely psychological. He believed something deeper, that the unconscious was not just personal. It connected to older symbolic systems, to myth, to what he called the marvelous embedded in reality. His role in surrealism was not to create images, but to construct a framework where reality itself could be questioned. Surrealism was not only psychological, it was political. Breton and others were deeply involved with revolutionary movements, particularly communism. One could argue that during these years, the young surrealists could not yet have recognized that this orientation was anything but spiritual and otherwise freedom-oriented. They naively believed that the liberation of the spirit and the liberation of society were linked, unaware that communism, as would later become clear, was also just about a system of control. If perception is controlled, then reality is controlled. To change one required changing the other, but this alliance was unstable. Political movements demanded clarity, direction, ideology. Surrealism resisted all of those. Breton's eventual break with the Communist Party reflects a deeper incompatibility. Politics seeks structure, surrealism dissolves it. The tension was never resolved, and it still exists today. Section 3. Max Ernst, Collage and the Shattered World. If Breton built the theory, Max Ernst lived its fracture. A veteran of the war, Ernst returned to a world that felt unreal. His response not to paint reality, but to dismantle it. He cut apart engravings, scientific illustrations, Victorian imagery, and recombined them into impossible scenes, bird-headed figures, hybrid machines, landscapes that seem both ancient and mechanical. These were not fantasies. They were reconstructions of a mind that no longer trusted continuity. Ernst once described his process as discovering images as if by hallucination. But unlike hallucination, his work is assembled deliberately. This tension finds him, control and chaos, construction and intrusion. Through techniques like frottage, rubbing textures to generate forms, Ernst allowed chance to intervene directly in the act of creation. The image was not invented, it was revealed through disturbance. Section 4. Dalí. Paranoia as method. If Ernst fractured reality, Salvador Dalí weaponized it. Dalí's contribution to surrealism was what he called the paranoiac critical method, a way of seeing multiple realities at once. A face becomes a landscape. A body becomes architecture. Time melts. But Dalí's genius is often misunderstood as eccentricity. In reality, his work is built on a precise psychological insight that the mind is capable of holding contradictions simultaneously. Paranoia, for Dalí, was not illness. It was a model, a way to dissolve stable meaning and replace it with shifting interpretations. His famous melting clocks are not dream imagery. They are attacks on certainty, on time, on structure, on the idea that reality is fixed. Dalí did not escape reality. He made it unstable. Section 5. The Labyrinth. Yves Tanguy and the landscape of the mind. While Dalí turned inward towards symbols, Yves Tanguy created something quieter and perhaps more unsettling. Landscapes without horizon, forms without clear identity, spaces that feel both infinite and enclosed. Tanguy did not depict dreams. He constructed environments where meaning cannot settle. These landscapes are not places. They are states of mind. There is no narrative, no event, no resolution, only presence. In this sense, Tanguy represents a different path in surrealism, not explosion, but suspension. The viewer is left inside the image without orientation, a labyrinth without walls. Section 6. Leonora Carrington. Myth as personal reality. Leonora Carrington brings something essential that is often overlooked: surrealism as lived mythology. Her work draws from Celtic symbols, alchemy, transformation, but not as reference, as experience. Carrington's life itself mirrored surrealist descent: breakdown, institutionalization, escape, reinvention. Her paintings are filled with hybrid beings, ritual spaces, shifting identities. But unlike the more theoretical surrealists, Carrington's work feels inhabited. These are not symbols observed from outside, they are worlds entered from within. She transforms surrealism from an intellectual project into something closer to initiation, a passage through instability into a new form of perception. For the surrealists, love was not romantic in the ordinary sense. It was absolute. Breton spoke of l'amour fou, mad love, a force that destabilizes identity, dissolves boundaries, and reveals hidden layers of reality. Love, like chance, was a gateway, not to happiness, but to intensity. Relationships within the group were often turbulent, obsessive, even destructive. Leonora Carrington and Max Ernst's relationship, for example, was not just emotional, it was mythic. Their lives and works began to merge, symbols crossing from one to the other. But when Ernst was arrested during the war, their world collapsed. Carrington's subsequent breakdown was not separate from surrealism. It was entangled with it. This reveals something essential. For the surrealists, life and art were not separate domains. To love was to enter the same instability as creation. To lose love was to fracture reality itself. Section 7. Antonin Artaud. The limit of the movement. If Carrington represents transformation, Antonin Artaud represents the limit. Artaud did not treat surrealism as art. He treated it as confrontation, with language, with identity, with reality itself. His eventual break with Breton reveals a core tension in the movement. Breton wanted structure. Artaud rejected it completely. For Artaud, the unconscious was not something to explore. It was something that consumed. His later writings and performances push beyond surrealism into something more dangerous, a space where meaning collapses entirely. He forces a question the movement could not fully answer: what happens when the descent has no return? Section 8. Louis Buñuel. Surrealism in motion. Surrealism did not stay on canvas. Through Louis Buñuel, it entered cinema. His film Un Chien Andalou, created with Dalí, is not narrative, it is disruption. A razor slicing an eye, a hand filled with ants, scenes that do not connect, but insist on being experienced. Buñuel understood something crucial. Film could replicate the logic of dreams more directly than painting. Time could fracture, cause could disappear. Images could collide without explanation. His work translates surrealism into movement and makes the viewer part of the experience, not observing, but undergoing. Section 9. Wilfredo Lam. Surrealism from outside the European perspective. Wilfredo Lam expands surrealism beyond Europe. His work merges surrealist techniques with Afro-Caribbean spiritual systems, particularly Santeria. Figures in his paintings are fragmented, hybrid, charged with symbolic force. But unlike European surrealism, Lam's work does not treat myth as distant. It is active, present, cultural. Through Lam, surrealism becomes something else, not just a method of disruption, but a fusion of worldviews. A recognition that the marvelous Breton spoke of exists differently across cultures, but with equal intensity. Section 10. The fractured unity. What begins to emerge when you look closely is not a unified movement, but a field of tension. The surrealists spoke as if they were building something together, a revolution of the mind, a new way of seeing. But internally, they were moving in different directions, sometimes subtly, sometimes violently. André Breton tried to hold it all together. He believed surrealism could be a coherent force, guided, shaped, even disciplined. That the exploration of the unconscious could remain anchored, that it could produce not just fragments, but meaning. But the others did not always follow. Max Ernst moved through images as if assembling a world that had already collapsed. His work suggests that coherence is no longer possible, that reality must be rebuilt from debris, not understood as a whole. Salvador Dalí, on the other hand, did not rebuild reality. He dissolved it. For him, contradiction was not something to resolve, it was something to intensify. The more unstable meaning became, the more alive the image felt. Yves Tanguy took a quieter path. He removed the human figure almost entirely, leaving behind landscapes that seem untouched by narrative or intention. Not broken, but emptied, as if meaning itself had receded. Leonora Carrington went further inward. She did not treat symbols as fragments or distortions, but as a language already alive, already functioning. Her work does not feel like exploration. It feels like inhabitation, as if she had crossed into a space the others were still trying to reach. And then, there is Antonin Artaud. Where Breton sought structure, Artaud rejected it. Where others experimented, Artaud endured. His trajectory exposes something the movement could not fully contain, that the forces surrealism unleashed were not always navigable, that the descent could become irreversible. What holds all of this together is not agreement. It is proximity to the same threshold. Each artist approached it differently, some circling it, some stepping across, some refusing to turn back. Surrealism, in this sense, was never a unified vision. It was a shared pressure point, a place where reality, identity, and perception began to give way, and where each artist had to decide, alone, how far they were willing to go. Section 11. The risk and the balance. World War II scattered the surrealists. Many fled Europe, especially to the United States. This exile changed the movement. Cut off from its original context, surrealism began to transform. It influenced American artists, particularly the emerging abstract expressionists. The focus shifted, from symbol to gesture, from image to process. The unconscious remained, but expressed differently. This moment marks the beginning of surrealism's dissolution into influence. No longer a unified group, but a set of ideas migrating across cultures. Surrealism is often presented as freedom, but it comes with risk. To destabilize reality is to destabilize the self. Some artists navigated this tension, others did not. The movement's daily routines, meetings, writing, collaboration, were not incidental. They were necessary. A way to anchor exploration, to ensure that the descent into the unconscious did not become permanent. This balance may be surrealism's most important lesson. You can approach the edge, but you must remain aware of it. There is a moment, Sometimes, when looking at a surrealist image, you feel that it is not you observing it, but it observing you. An eye in a wall, a figure without a face, a landscape that feels aware. This is not accidental. Surrealism destabilizes the position of the viewer. You are no longer outside the image. You are implicated in it. This reverses the normal relationship between subject and object. The artwork is not passive. It becomes a mirror that does not reflect, but transforms. Section 12. The original artists are gone. The method remains. The original surrealists are no longer here. But what they uncovered remains. Not as images, but as a way of seeing. Every time reality feels unstable, every time meaning fractures, every time something ordinary reveals something strange, you're encountering the same field they explored. Today, surrealism has returned in a new form, not as a movement, but as a condition. Endless images, algorithmic generation, unexpected juxtapositions. The digital world produces constantly what the surrealists had to provoke: discontinuity, collision, strangeness. But there is a difference. For the surrealists, these experiences were rare and intentional. Today they are constant and often unconscious, which raises a new question. If everything becomes surreal, does the surreal lose its power? Or does it become the new reality? The question is not whether surrealism still exists. It does. The question is, will you recognize it when it appears? If surrealism teaches anything, it's this: reality is not as solid as it appears. It shifts, it opens, it waits for you to notice. The artists we followed didn't escape the world. They stepped deeper into it, past logic, past certainty, into something unstable, but alive. That space still exists. You don't need to be a painter or a filmmaker or a poet to find it. You only need to pay attention to the strange coincidence, the image that won't leave you, the thought that doesn't quite belong to you. That's where it begins. If this kind of exploration speaks to you, if you're interested in the hidden structures behind art, ideas, perception, and liminal spaces, subscribe to This Is It. Because this isn't just about movements from the past. It's about learning to see differently. And once you do, there's no going back.